I want you to imagine for a moment a man who had everything the world could offer: fame, a cannon for an arm, and a future so bright it was blinding. Then, in a single, brutal instant, it was all ripped away. Tonight's story is about what happens after the cheering stops. He was Cole the Comet Sullivan, a superstar quarterback whose legend was cut short by a paralyzing accident a decade ago. Now he lives as a ghost in a glass mansion perched 10,000 feet up in the mountains of Aspen, surrounded by trophies that feel more like tombstones. His days are a bitter blur of physical therapy and watching skiers carve down the slopes, a constant, cruel reminder of the motion he's lost. Then, during a blizzard, there's a knock on his door. He expects a lost tourist, but instead finds a 6-year-old girl named Willow, shivering in a thin coat. She doesn't ask for money. She asks for his untouched dinner. In exchange, she makes an impossible offer. "Trade me your leftovers," she says, her voice barely a whisper against the wind, "and I will help you find your feet again." He lets out a harsh, rusty laugh, a sound full of disbelief. But the little girl doesn't flinch. Before we dive into what she said next, I'm just curious what time it is where you are right now. Whether it's morning coffee or late at night, I'm so glad you're here. Let me know in the comments. She just looks at him with an unnerving wisdom and says, "It's not your legs that are broken, mister. It's your heart." Cole, a man who had been given every medical diagnosis imaginable, was now face to face with a 6-year-old girl offering a prescription for his soul. Against every logical instinct, he let her in. The next morning, she didn't want to watch TV or play with the expensive, untouched toys in his game room. Instead, she led him to a part of his multi-acre property he had long ignored. A forgotten garden on a steep, rocky slope, choked with weeds and buried under a thin layer of snow. It was a place where things had gone to die. "This is it," she announced, her breath fogging in the crisp mountain air. "This is how we fix you." His therapy, she explained, wasn't about his legs. It was about bringing this dead patch of earth back to life. "Things that are broken can grow again," she said with that same unnerving certainty. "But you have to give them a reason. When this garden starts to live again, maybe you will too." It was the most ridiculous thing he had ever heard. The slope was nearly impossible to navigate in a wheelchair. The work would be grueling. He was a former athlete who believed in science, in tangible results. This was folklore. Yet, as he looked out at the endless, empty days stretching before him, a bleak curiosity took hold. He had tried everything else. What did he have to lose? It's a crazy proposition, right? A garden for a miracle. But sometimes, when you've hit rock bottom, you're willing to try anything. I have a question for you all. When facing an impossible problem, do you trust 1 for logic and science, or 2 for faith and intuition? Drop a 1 or a 2 in the comments. I'm fascinated to see how we all think. That afternoon, Cole Sullivan, the man who once commanded stadiums, found himself online, ordering heirloom seeds and a child-sized watering can. He didn't know if he was desperate or just plain crazy. A few days into their strange project, a new variable entered the equation: Willow's mother, Sarah. She showed up at the mansion one evening, after a double shift at a diner down in the valley, her face etched with exhaustion and a fierce protective worry. She wasn't there to ask for a handout. She was there to retrieve her daughter, her eyes full of suspicion for the wealthy recluse who had suddenly taken an interest in her child. The confrontation was tense. Sarah stood on his doorstep, proud and defiant, ready to fight for her daughter. But Cole didn't see a threat. He saw a woman who was just as trapped as he was, just in a different kind of prison. He saw the dark circles under her eyes from lack of sleep, the worn-out soles of her shoes, and the same quiet loneliness that echoed through the empty halls of his own life. He made her an offer, framing it not as charity, but as a business proposition. "This garden project of hers," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "It's going to take time. The weather in these mountains is unpredictable. It would be more efficient if you both stayed here until the work is done." He offered them a guest cottage on the property, a small, self-contained unit where they could have their privacy. It was a logical solution to a logistical problem, or at least, that's what he told himself. Sarah wanted to refuse. Her pride screamed at her to walk away. But then she looked at Willow, who was already showing her the tiny seeds they were going to plant, her face glowing with a hope Sarah hadn't seen in months. For her daughter, she swallowed her pride and agreed. And so the alliance was formed. 3 broken, lonely people under one roof, bound by the fragile hope of bringing a dead garden on a mountainside back to life. Their days fell into a strange, new rhythm, dictated by the stubborn mountain soil. The work was grueling. From his all-terrain wheelchair, Cole used the powerful arms that had once thrown touchdowns to break up the frozen earth with hand tools, while Sarah and Willow cleared away rocks and dead roots. He was the brute force. They were the gentle hands that planted the seeds. For weeks, nothing happened. It was just cold dirt and cynical patience. Cole felt foolish, a broken man playing a child's game on a frozen mountain. He was just going through the motions, waiting for the inevitable failure. Then, one crisp morning, Willow's shriek of pure joy cut through the air. "Cole, come see." Poking through the dark soil was a single, tiny green sprout, impossibly fragile, yet defiant against the cold. As Cole stared at that tiny speck of life, a jolt, like a faint electrical current, shot through his right thigh. He froze, dismissing it as a phantom sensation, a cruel trick of a damaged nervous system. But as he watched Willow gently water the sprout, he felt it again, a deep, dormant tingling, a whisper of feeling in a place that had been silent for a decade. He didn't tell them. He was too afraid to voice the impossible, too scared to hope. But he couldn't deny the connection. As more green shoots bravely pushed their way toward the sun, the phantom feelings in his legs became more frequent, more real. A warmth in his calf, a tremor in his foot. The life returning to the barren garden was mirroring the life returning to his own body. That first little sign of hope after you've almost given up. It's one of the most powerful feelings in the world, isn't it? It could be a sprout in a garden, a kind word from a stranger, or a text message you've been waiting for. Tell me about a small sign of hope that kept you going. I think we could all use a little bit of that light today. Staring at his own useless legs, Cole Sullivan felt a wild, terrifying, and absolutely undeniable hope take root in his heart. But a miracle this profound couldn't stay a secret for long. A story that powerful couldn't be contained by a garden wall. It started as a whisper in the small town of Aspen. A groundskeeper mentioned it at a local bar. A physical therapist saw Cole's improved muscle response and told his wife. A local reporter wrote a small, human interest piece. But when the national media got hold of it, the whisper became a roar. The Comet's miraculous comeback, the headlines asked. And with that, their private world was torn open for public consumption. The spotlight attracted a predator. Dr. Alastair Finch, a celebrity TV doctor who had built an empire on debunking miracle cures with smug, scientific certainty, saw the story as his next big target. On his primetime show, Finch's Verdict, he dedicated an entire segment to the Aspen hoax, He showed satellite images of Cole's sprawling mansion, and in stark contrast, the rundown apartment building where Sarah and Willow used to live. He painted Sarah as a cunning opportunist, and Willow as a pawn in a cruel, emotional cons. "This isn't a miracle," Finch declared to his millions of viewers, his voice dripping with condescension. "It is a masterclass in manipulation, giving false hope to thousands of people who suffer from real spinal cord injuries." Then came the challenge, delivered with a predatory smile. "So I'll make you a deal, Cole Sullivan," he said, looking straight into the camera. "Prove it. Allow a team of independent specialists to observe and verify your so-called recovery. If you can take a single, unaided step, my network will donate $1 million to a spinal cord research charity. But when you fail, you will go on this show and admit to the world that you have been peddling a dangerous lie." The gauntlet had been thrown. Their quiet, personal journey of healing had just been turned into a public spectacle, a trial by media. The public challenge turned their sanctuary into a prison. News vans camped at the base of his long, private driveway. Drones buzzed over the property, trying to get a glimpse of the miracle garden. The poison of the world's skepticism began to seep through the walls. Dr. Finch's words, wrapped in the authority of science, echoed in Cole's mind. A hoax. Manipulation. False hope. The old, bitter Cole, the one who trusted no one, began to stir from his slumber. Was he just a fool? A broken man so desperate for a cure that he'd let a child's fantasy convince him he could feel something that wasn't there. Doubt is a powerful toxin. The tingling in his legs faded, replaced by the familiar deadening numbness. The fledgling connection between his mind and his muscles was severed, and in his fear and disappointment, he did what he always did. He pushed people away. He found Sarah in the kitchen, and the words that came out of him were cruel, laced with the venom of his own returning despair. "Is this what you wanted?" he snarled. "This media circus? Did you really think this little game of yours would work?" He saw the hurt flash in her eyes, saw Willow shrink away in the doorway, and he hated himself for it. But he couldn't stop. That night, a late spring frost fell upon the mountain. The tender new sprouts in their garden, the ones that had been a symbol of so much hope, blackened and withered under the sudden killing cold. The garden was dying, and as Cole sat alone in his vast, silent mansion, watching the frost creep across the window panes, he realized the hope inside him was dying with it. He was back where he started, alone, trapped, and broken. But this time, it was worse. Because for one brief, beautiful moment, he had remembered what it felt like to believe. Cole was drowning in the silence of his own making when a ghost from his past walked through the door. Coach Franklin, the tough-as-nails mentor who had forged him into a champion, showed up unannounced. He found Cole in his trophy room, surrounded by the gleaming relics of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. The coach didn't offer sympathy. He offered a reality check. "I didn't coach a quitter, Sullivan," he growled, his voice the same gravelly roar that used to echo across the practice field. He picked up the football from Cole's final game-winning drive. The man who threw this ball got sacked twice, had a separated shoulder, and still marched his team 80 yards down the field with a minute left on the clock. You think a 300-pound lineman is tougher than some slick TV doctor with perfect hair? You're letting him get in your head, and you're letting him win. He pointed out the window, toward the guest cottage where Sarah and Willow were staying. "That little girl out there," he said, his voice softening just a fraction. "She didn't see the broken man in the wheelchair. She saw the champion. She believes in you more than you believe in yourself right now." "So, who are you going to prove right, Cole? Her or him?" The words hit Cole harder than any linebacker ever had. For a decade, he had let the accident define him. Now he was letting Dr. Finch define him. He had forgotten who he was. We all have that one person, don't we? The one who can call us out on our nonsense and remind us of who we really are when we've forgotten. For Cole, it was his coach. Who is that person for you? You don't have to name them, but if you have someone like that, just hit the like button as a little nod to them. Let's show some love for the truth-tellers in our lives. Staring at the reflection of his own tired face in a championship trophy, Cole felt a familiar fire begin to burn through the ice in his veins. The game wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The first thing a champion does after getting knocked down is get back to his team. Cole's first stop wasn't his publicist, it was the guest cottage. He wheeled himself to the door and apologized. He didn't make excuses. He told Sarah and Willow that he had been a coward, that he had let his own fear and the world's cynicism break his spirit. He asked for their forgiveness and asked them to believe in him one more time. Willow, with the boundless grace of a child, simply hugged his leg and said, "I knew you'd come back." With his team reassembled, Cole went on the offensive. He didn't call a press conference. He sat in his own living room, set up his own camera, and spoke directly to the world. The video went viral in hours. "Dr. Finch," he began, his voice steady and strong. "You challenged a broken man, and for a moment you almost won, but you made a mistake. You didn't just challenge me. You challenged the faith of a 6-year-old girl. And that's a fight you can't win." He looked straight into the lens. "I accept your challenge, but I'm raising the stakes. When I take that first step, your network won't just donate $1 million to charity. I will personally match it, and we will use that money to build a rehabilitation center right here in Aspen, a place for athletes who've been told to give up. We'll call it Willow's Garden." He had just transformed a cynical media stunt into a movement. He was no longer a potential fraud being exposed. He was an underdog fighting for every person who had ever been told something was impossible. The world was now watching, not for a failure, but for a miracle. With that public declaration, something inside Cole shifted permanently. The doubt was gone, replaced by a warrior's focus. The mansion was no longer a hospital for a broken man. It became a training camp for a champion. Every morning, he was in the garden with Willow and Sarah. And as the plants reached for the sun, the dormant nerves in his legs began to sing with life. The faint tingling he'd felt before returned with a vengeance, a steady current of energy flowing through him. For the first time, when he concentrated, he could make his toes twitch on command. He returned to his medical team, not as a patient seeking a cure, but as a phenomenon demanding an explanation. They ran a new series of MRIs, and the doctors, the same ones who had told him a decade ago that he would never feel anything below his waist again, stared at the scans in stunned silence. "It's impossible," his lead neurologist whispered, pointing at the screen. "The nerve pathways. They're not just firing, they're regenerating. It's like they're rebuilding themselves. This doesn't happen. Medically, this is not supposed to happen." When they asked him what experimental treatment he'd undergone, what secret drug he was taking, Cole's answer was simple. "I've been planting a garden with a 6-year-old girl. It's moments like these that make you wonder about the things we can't measure or explain. The power of hope, the strength of the human spirit." Have you ever experienced something you just couldn't explain? A moment of pure magic or an unbelievable coincidence? Share your story in the comments. I truly believe we all have at least one. The doctors had no explanation. But they had undeniable proof. A miracle was unfolding in Aspen, Colorado, and the whole world was about to watch its final act. The night of the live broadcast felt less like a television event and more like a public execution. Dr. Finch had constructed a cold, sterile set that looked more like a laboratory than a TV studio, complete with a panel of stone-faced medical experts. The air was thick with skepticism. Finch was in his element, a smug ringmaster ready to expose the fraud. Cole didn't arrive in his wheelchair. He walked onto the stage slowly, awkwardly, using a pair of forearm crutches, his face a mask of calm determination. In the small family section, Willow, Sarah, and Coach Franklin watched, their hands clasped together. After a dramatic monologue about scientific integrity, Finch gave the signal. The experts confirmed Cole's legs were free of any electronic stimulants or hidden devices. The stage was his. "The floor is yours, Mr. Sullivan," Finch said, the sneer audible in his voice. Cole's eyes scanned the crowd, the cameras, the stern-faced doctors, and then he found what he was looking for. Willow. She gave him a tiny, confident nod. That was all he needed. He took a deep breath and let the crutches clatter to the floor. For a heart-stopping moment, he swayed, his body a battlefield between a decade of muscle memory and a new, fragile hope. The studio was so quiet, you could hear a pin drop. Then, he lifted his right foot. He planted it firmly on the ground, then his left, one step, then another. He was unsteady, awkward, but he was walking. A collective gasp rippled through the studio audience. Tears streamed down Sarah's face, and on the face of Dr. Alistair Finch. For the first time, there was a look of pure, unadulterated shock. Cole didn't stop until he reached his daughter, dropping to his knees and pulling her into an embrace. A champion who had just completed the greatest comeback of all time. The world didn't just watch. It was changed. Cole's walk became the lead story on every news channel across the globe. It was more than a sports comeback. It was a testament to the human spirit. Dr. Alistair Finch's career, built on a foundation of smug cynicism, imploded overnight. His show was suspended, his credibility shattered, publicly humbled by the very miracle he had tried to destroy. In the wake of the broadcast, Hollywood came calling. Book deals, movie rights, talk show appearances. The world wanted to package and sell their story. But Cole, with Sarah by his side, and Willow as his moral compass, turned them all down. He had been given a second chance, and he refused to let it become a spectacle. Instead, he channeled the global attention into the promise he had made. They officially launched the Willow's Garden Foundation. It wasn't just another research charity. It was envisioned as a revolutionary rehabilitation center, a place that would combine cutting-edge neurological science with holistic therapies that healed the mind and spirit. It would be a place for athletes and everyday people who had been told to give up, a sanctuary that understood that true recovery wasn't just about the body, but about the heart. Sarah, with her quiet strength and real-world practicality, managed the foundation's operations. Cole provided the vision and the initial funding, and Willow was its soul. The walk across that stage wasn't the finish line. For this new, unlikely family, it was just the beginning. They were taking their private miracle and turning it into a public legacy of hope. 1 year later, we're back where it all began, in the garden on the side of the mountain in Aspen. But it's no longer a forgotten patch of weeds. It's a paradise, bursting with color and life, a riot of wildflowers and resilient mountain herbs. And walking through it is Cole Sullivan. Not on crutches, not with a cane, but walking freely. He kneels down, an action once impossible, to help Willow tend to a patch of stubborn daisies. Sarah watches them from a nearby bench, her expression one of quiet, profound peace. They are not an alliance of the lonely anymore. They are a family. Willow holds up a daisy that has grown through a crack in a rock. "See," she says, looking at Cole. "I told you. Broken things can grow again, sometimes even stronger." And in that moment, Cole understands the full truth. The doctors still study his case, calling it an anomaly, a 1 in a billion regeneration. But he knows they're missing the point. The healing of his nerves was just a symptom. The real miracle happened the day a little girl taught him that his heart needed tending to, just like a garden. She gave him a reason to fight, a purpose beyond his own pain. The true miracle wasn't that he learned to walk again. It was that he learned how to love again. Their story is a powerful reminder that our deepest healing often begins when we start caring for something outside of ourselves. The real miracles aren't the ones that defy science, but the ones that redefine our hearts. If you believe that love and purpose can create their own kind of magic, then make sure you subscribe and join this community. Because stories like these, the ones that remind us of our own strength, deserve to be shared. Thank you for sharing this journey with me tonight.